All right, everybody, I am back. Good to be back. And I do want to talk about, so this is really the time of the year where the coaching carousel, it really heats up, right? Like we have seen a lot of coaching changes so far this season, specifically firings. We saw Clay Helton out at USC. We saw Ed Orgeron out at LSU. But this is where things really ramp up. First of all, you have those schools are ultimately going to make their hires. Wherever they hire their coaches from are going to have to replace their coaches. So there's a chance a guy like James Franklin could leave Penn State. That means Penn State is looking for a head coach. Same with Luke Fickell at Cincinnati, etc. And then you have a school like Florida that you have absolutely no idea what's going on and whether Dan Mullen is going to survive this year. So all sorts of coaching carousel stuff. But what I will tell you, however, is that there was kind of a big piece of coaching carousel news that happened Monday night that at first glance does not appear to be coaching carousel news. And that news is that at the University of Miami, the U, it's all about the U. You can't see me, but I'm holding up my hands. Miami, on Monday, they fired, drumroll please, no, not Manny Diaz, but they did fire their AD, Blake James. And at first glance, you probably sit there and say, Torres, what does that have to do with the coaching carousel? Why does the AD matter? Well, it matters for a few reasons, and this is why this is actually a really, really, really big story in terms of why this is important, why this piece of news, Miami firing Blake James, is a huge piece of news in the coaching carousel world. First of all, there's the fact that the AD is out at Miami. The guy that hired Manny Diaz, the guy who publicly did not defend Manny Diaz a few years ago, there's that part. Two, there's the fact that, oh, by the way, it's not like Manny Diaz is doing anything to help the situation himself. Miami is 5-5 overall. They're coming off a loss to Florida State, and what I would say is this. Listen, I'm not a Miami fan. I understand the frustration of Miami fans that have seen 5 national championships in the last 40 or so years. But at the same time, this team has dealt with all sorts of injuries. De'Aaron King has gone down. Cameron Harris, the running back, has gone down. Bubba Bolden, their best defensive player, has gone down. So it's been a tough year for Manny Diaz. And prior to the loss last week against Florida State, they had won 3 in a row. And in their last 6 games, they had actually gone 3-3, but all 3 losses are by 3 points or less. The point I'm trying to make, yes, they're 5-5. They could easily be, 7-3, maybe even 8-2. With the 2 losses, of course, would have come to Alabama and Michigan State, which, as I record right now, are both top 10 teams in college football. Not excusing Manny Diaz, not saying that it matters. I actually don't think he's been as bad as people realize, but I also understand if you're a Miami fan listening to this, this is a results-based business, and the results just haven't worked out enough for Manny Diaz. As I said, 5-5 overall this year, 19-5 overall in year 3 as the head coach at Miami. The final variable that makes this a coaching carousel situation is the fact that the school has itself very publicly announced and basically said publicly that we are committed to winning in football. Don't know if you guys remember this story, but it was sometime in early to mid-September. Kirk Herbstreit was talking on College Game Day about Miami, and the conversation was about Manny Diaz, and Kirk Herbstreit said, it doesn't really matter who the coach is at Miami because they're not financially invested in winning. Well, the administration took it personally. In about the last 2, 3, 4 weeks, the school president has come out and basically said, we are going to do whatever it takes to win at the highest level in football and in athletics in general. We are committed to winning at the highest level in football and athletics in general. And so when you take those 3 things, you soon start to realize that this is, in fact, a coaching carousel story. AD out, Manny Diaz under real fire from the fan base, and the school administration basically sitting there saying, yeah, we're committed to doing anything to winning. I'd be a little nervous if I was Manny Diaz right now. But while the obvious kind of direct correlation, draw lines, whatever, idea would be to sit there and say, well, it's clear Manny Diaz is not going to survive this year, I actually don't think that's the case. I think this is the rare move that is made right now with the intention of firing Manny Diaz next year and bringing in a new coach in the fall of 2022 or the winter of 2023 for the fall of 2023 football season. Now, a lot of you Miami fans are sitting there saying, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why do you fire the AD if you're planning on keeping the head coach for another year? I'm just going to tell you, I know Miami fans are thinking it because a lot of you tweeted at me when I said it. What I would say about that is this. First of all, the timing doesn't make sense. If you're planning on firing your football coach this year, this is the reality. You just fired your AD on November 15th with exactly 2 Saturdays left in college football. So unless the school president already has an AD in mind and that AD already has a candidate in mind, it seems very unlikely to me that the candidate will be able to come in and hire a football coach this cycle. Just do some mental math here. It's November 15th. Assuming the school president doesn't have the next guy or girl already in line, realistically, it's going to be probably 10 days to 2 weeks at minimum before you find the AD, unless you rush the search and get the wrong person, which I don't think you'll do. And even if you get that person in place by December 1st, remember, that is when LSU is going to start making the big calls to close the deal on whoever their head coach is once that guy's season is finished. That's when USC is going to make the calls to seal the deal on their coach. That's when other jobs that we can't foresee opening become open again, maybe a Penn State with James Franklin if he decides to leave. And so I just bring this up to say, if you are the new Miami AD, you know that ultimately the only thing that you have to do, the only thing that matters is hiring the right football coach, and you don't want to rush the process. The worst thing you could do is wait a little bit too, the best thing you could do is wait a little bit too long. The worst thing you can do is fire this guy for the sake of firing him and then bring in the wrong guy to replace him. And so to me, this feels like something that is done with the fall of 2022 in mind of ultimately getting rid of Manny Diaz. And I think anybody who has lived in the corporate world or had any type of job like this understands what I'm talking about and why it makes sense beyond just the timeline. I can tell you, I've worked in the corporate world for a long time. A lot of you work in the corporate world as well. Most big decisions, even when they're already made, they don't get made right away, right? The boss doesn't come in the first day and just fire everybody. What they do, if you've worked in the corporate world, you know what they do. They come in, they shake everybody's hand, they say, no, we're just going to evaluate everything. Then they go sit in your meetings, they have a little notepad, they're writing notes, you're kind of wondering, what the heck are they writing down? No, it's nothing, it's no big deal, we're just evaluating, we're just trying to figure out how you guys operate. Well, that's what I would expect Miami's AD to do. I'd expect him or her to get hired sometime in early to mid-December. At that point, again, you don't want to rush firing Manny Diaz without having the next guy in place, and instead you sit back and you, quote-unquote, evaluate everything. You start to figure out what's working, what's not, and in the meantime, what you really do, which is really important, is you start to get the money together. So when it's time to fire Manny Diaz, you have the money to just give him and tell him to get the heck out. And then from there, you also have the money to start pursuing candidates through their agents. Again, this is a process. This takes time. Do you think that USC, for example, decided to fire Clay Helton without any thought going into it in week 2? No, of course not. Remember, LSU with Ed Orgeron decided to they were working on a buyout for a week before they let him go, and they may have even been working on it before that. And so when I look at this situation, I think there's a lot of context here that really does matter, and I actually think the USC example is the best example that I can use of late. I live in Los Angeles. I can tell you, the USC AD, it's crazy because the USC situation a few years ago is almost identical to what is going on at Miami right now. If you remember Mike Bone, the current USC AD, he was brought in the fall of 2019. That was kind of a crazy year. USC's dealing with all sorts of drama. He's brought in the fall of 2019. Now, admittedly, once he got the job, it took him about 2-3 weeks after the season to officially announce that Clay Helton was coming back because, again, he came in, he read the lay of the land, he figured out how much money he had for buyout money, he figured out how much money he had for the next head coach, and he decided, you know what, we're going to pump the brakes, we're going to give this guy another year, knowing the first chance we get, he's out. Well, what happened? COVID happens. Obviously, USC goes 4-1 last year in a 5-game season, or maybe they were 5-1. I can't remember. I think they were 5-1, and it got pushed back another year. But then what happened this year? The first chance USC got. The first time Clay Helton laid an egg on national TV against Stanford, what'd they do? They got rid of him. And I could see the almost exact same scenario happening at Miami next year. I'll also say in college basketball, there was something pretty similar, and it's a very small example that most of you probably don't even know about. But 2 years ago, Boston College was ready to fire their basketball coach. His name was Jim Christian. They publicly announced that they are going to give him another year while raising funds to improve the facilities and improve the situation for the basketball program. What was not said in that context, which mattered, was we're raising all this money, getting great facilities, so we can fire this guy and bring in the next guy. And so that is what I believe is happening at Miami right now. I believe this was a calculated move. They don't believe that Blake James is the guy to get to hire the next head coach. He was already looking for a way out anyway because he knew his time was ticking there. So get the next guy or girl in. Give him a year to evaluate. Give him a year to raise funds. Give him a year for Manny Diaz's buyout to go down. Give him a year for maybe the next candidate's buyout to go down as well. Give them a year to figure out the lay of the land, and then go ahead and the first chance you get next year, give the axe to Manny Diaz and move on. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's fair. In many ways, it's actually really, really, really bad. I mean, the idea that Manny Diaz could essentially be coaching next year, basically knowing what is at stake, the fact that his staff knows what is at stake this offseason, the fact that his players now are going into a season where he may be a lame duck. What I would tell Manny Diaz, you better have the season of your life next year. I think you survived this year, Manny Diaz, but I believe that whoever the next AD is, they will be looking for the first opportunity to get rid of you. If you enjoyed this video, please do me a favor. Go ahead and subscribe to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube channel. Lots of great coverage of the college football coaching carousel. Also, make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter and at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram.